What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Officer Training School. My name is Joushi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about a recent combination of units that has really taken the competitive world by storm out of nowhere, and it's something that I really only hear very strong players talking about, and it hasn't really made its way down to most of the mid tables and the lower tables. So I'm going to talk about it now, and hopefully this is something that you can use in your next GT. It is possible that this is going to get nerfed out of the game before most people start playing with it, but while it is still available, it is still very good. We know that this was kind of playable during the index, but there were a couple of small changes moving from the index to the codex that made it a lot better. So, in today's lesson plan, we're going to be talking about the Command Squad and the Ogryn Bodyguard combinations basics. We're going to talk about some weird rules interactions and why it actually works. We'll talk a little bit about which Command Squads we actually want to use, then orders and stratagems, and lastly, as always, we will talk about the general strategy in order to actually play this unit. So, firstly, let's go ahead and talk about what this unit is. The Command Squad and the Ogryn Bodyguard is just a really, really efficient unit. It's a lot harder to kill than people will generally expect, so you are going to surprise a lot of people with this unit. It's going to take a lot more firepower, a lot more attacks than they think in order to take them down, because it just looks like guardsmen. Lastly, it provides a lot of needed durability, especially for a couple of detachments where we're playing a lot of toughness 3, toughness 4 models, and having something that is a higher toughness than that is really powerful. So let's go ahead and talk about the weird rules interactions that make this unit actually work. The first one is, despite the name, the Ogryn Bodyguard is not a bodyguard unit. A bodyguard unit is defined based on something that you're actually attached to. It is defined underneath the leader rules and the loyal protector rule of Ogryn Bodyguards, and also Nork do not attach you, you join it, and there is an important distinction to be made here. It is basically an upgrade you can purchase for your command squad. It is not a distinct unit. You can never take an Ogryn Bodyguard on its own, and this was very powerful in the index because it was not a character. You could put wounds on the Ogryn Bodyguard in order to keep a unit alive a little bit longer. However, now that it has the character keyword, it has changed a little bit. So we do need to recognize that it is not an attached unit. It is joined to a command squad. Next, why is the unit toughness 6? This unit is toughness 6, you guys. It is based on the fact that the unit's toughness characteristic is normally determined, or we're used to seeing it based on the bodyguard models, which again, the Ogryn Bodyguard is not. It is a non-attached unit, and therefore, you take the unit's highest toughness characteristic of any individual model, which is the Ogryn Bodyguard at toughness 6. However, if you were to attach the same package to Cadians or Kazarkin or whatever else that you want to, you will go back to being toughness 3. So that is why it is toughness 6. You're using the highest toughness characteristic of the single model in the unit. Next, why can we allocate wounds to characters? This is something that is also a little bit non-intuitive, but if you're used to playing Gaunt's Ghost or St. Celestine or Marnius Calgar, you should be used to seeing this by now already. There are a lot of units in the game where it is one character and then 2 non-character models that are in the same unit. Each time an attack successfully wounds an attached unit, that attack cannot be allocated to a character model in that unit. But again, this keys off of whether or not it is an attached unit, and we are not an attached unit. As soon as the last bodyguard model in an attached unit has been destroyed, which we do not have an attached bodyguard unit, any attacks made against that unit that have yet to be allocated can then be allocated to character models in that unit. So because we are not attached to a bodyguard unit, we are able to immediately put wounds on the character, so the Cadian or Catachan commander, and also the Ogryn Bodyguard. As we have already noted, this is also true of St. Celestine, Marnius Calgar, and Gaunt's Ghost, because none of these are attached. We cannot put things on Marnius Calgar until the company heroes or the heavy intercessors are all dead. But as soon as all of those bodyguards die, we can then start taking wounds on the characters. For the same reason, this one doesn't come up nearly as often. Precision does not work against this unit. Precision specifies that it only works against attached units, which again, we are not one of those. So let's talk a little bit about which command squad we should actually be using for these. And there are 2 basic options that we have. It's the Cadian command squad and the Catachan command squad. I'll take this time right now to say we don't really want to use the Krieg command squad for a couple of major reasons. The first major reason is it doesn't really have any special weapons that we want, so it loses out to the Catachan in that regard. And the second major reason is it does not have a metapack. The metapack in Krieg is attached to the Death Corps of Krieg battle line unit. It is not part of the Krieg command squad, which has the alchemic counter agents for the 6-up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds, which is way worse than the medpack rule. So let's talk a little bit about what the Cadians do for us. It gives us the benefit of cover on objectives as long as the officer is alive. You get a Power Fist on the Cadian commander and a Power Fist on one of the Cadian veterans for 6 Power Fist attacks. You have to take the Master Vox and you have to take the Regimental Standard for the 24-inch orders and +1 objective control on all models in the unit. In general, we're going to be leaning into the melee part of this unit, so it's usually going to be a Ogryn Maul on their Ogryn Bodyguard, especially with the Power Fist. It is possible to instead go for a Ripper Gun and a Plasma Gun on the Cadian Veteran instead of the Power Fist, but at that point, we probably want to be taking the Catachan unit anyway. On the other hand, the Catachan has access to assault weapons. As long as the officer is alive, all weapons in the unit count as assault. And so what you can do is, instead of taking the Regimental Standard or the Master Vox, you can take a Heavy Flamer, and a Plasma Gun. And because we're leaning into the shooting part of the Catachan unit, you generally put a Ripper Gun onto the Ogryn Bodyguard as well for just a little bit of extra shooting. The downside for the Catachan, though, is you do lose Scout unless you're playing this very specifically in recon element, where you can, for a couple of points, give the Ogryn Bodyguard the Scout enhancement. So, as just a quick summary, Cadians are better in melee and utility. They have slightly better staying power, so they will survive a little bit longer due to the cover on objectives, whereas Catachan have better guns and generally just have better shooting, because a lot of the shots coming out from the Cadian command squad are just lasgun shots. It's not a lot of damage. But mostly, it becomes a question of what does your army need more of? Some quick examples. Because Bridgehead already has a lot of skirmishing units and indirect, the staying power is a little bit more valuable. You want something that your opponent is going to have to overcommit to actually killing. And it's a much needed order at 24 inches, so the Master Vox is very useful. On the other hand, if you're playing combined, you already have plenty of firepower. And because you're generally playing a lot less indirect, Combined really likes having this unit that's kind of fast, running around with Assault in order to chase down elves and other MSU. So let's talk about how we actually equip these units. The Cadian Command Squad doesn't have a lot of choices. You're going to take the Commander with the best weapons available, which is a Power Fist and a Plasma Pistol. Then, the Veteran with a Regimental Standard, the Veteran with a Master Vox, and the Veteran with a Medipack all are required. I don't think you have any changes that you can make to them. And then you have the one guy who normally has a Chainsword and a Las Pistol that you're going to give a Power Fist and a Plasma Pistol. Then the Ogryn Bodyguard, you're going to take a Ogryn Maul and the Brute Shield for the 4-up infil. This is always better than the 7th wound that you can potentially put on this model. The other version, with the Catachan, has more options. The Commander, you're still going to do the same thing, Power Fist and Plasma Pistol. You still continue to take the Medipack because it's very important that you are going to be reviving models in this unit. And then in the current meta, it's generally the Veteran with a Heavy Flamer and the Veteran with a Plasma Gun. And then your third one is a little bit more up to choice. I know a lot of people currently are liking the Flamer because we are playing against a lot of elves and a lot of other Toughness 3 models where the Flamer actually becomes more relevant. However, if you would prefer to play with a Melt-A-Gun or a Grenade Launcher, this is totally fine. In another meta, I would not be surprised if instead of the Flamer and the Heavy Flamer, the Melt-A-Gun and Grenade Launcher are just more meta. But right now, in the general meta we're playing in, we have to play up against Eldari, which is why the Heavy Flamer and the Flamer are currently the guns of choice. Like we also mentioned, the Ogryn Bodyguard wants the Ripper Gun and the Brute Shield to lean into the fact that this is a slightly better shooting unit, because with a lot of the Assault, you can't charge after that anyway, and of course, getting out of a transport, you're going to be shooting, but you're not going to be able to charge anyway. Let's take a little bit of time to talk about the orders and stratagems you can use on this unit. And you can't order this unit. You can never receive an order currently with the rules as they're currently written, because they do not have the regiment keyword and they do not have the squadron keyword. And Lord Solar, who used to be able to order these kind of units, can no longer do that. So you can't order this. In terms of what stratagems you want to use, one of the most interesting ones that you can actually use on this unit that you wouldn't generally be using in a lot of other situations is Courageous Diversion in the Recon element, because you can give this unit that is already surprisingly durable -1 to hit, as well as a 6-up Feel No Pain across all of the models instead of just the Ogryn Bodyguard. So next, let's go ahead and talk about how we want to be allocating wounds on this unit, because it's a little bit weird and it's actually a fairly involved decision. The one thing that we're generally going to say is that the last model alive should almost always be the veteran with the med pack, since they can revive most of the rest of the squad. Also worth noting that both the major rules for these units, the cover on objectives and assault, rely on the unit having the officer alive. So sometimes you're going to want to keep that unit alive. The order in which you actually want to kill these is usually you're going to be taking wounds on the veterans to protect assassination, and also in order to keep the officer and the Ogryn Bodyguard alive, because you cannot revive them. But here are a couple of things to generally think about while you're trying to decide what order to take wounds on. Firstly, you're going to want to take multi-damage wounds on the veterans to waste damage. If your opponent is shooting at you with an autocannon, which is 3 damage, you don't want to put that on the Cadian commander because that could kill him in one shot. However, the reverse is also true. If you're going to take 1 damage wounds, you can put them on the commander to maximize the value of the field of pain from the Ogryn Bodyguard. And also because, honestly, the rules that the officers give are nice, but not necessarily that important. But sometimes it's really important that you keep the veterans alive simply because they present OC. In which case, you're going to take wounds on the commander and the Ogryn Bodyguard to preserve the model count. But in general, if you don't know better, you're going to generally take wounds on the 3 veterans that don't have the medipack, and then you're going to do the commander for the 4-up Film of Pain, and then you're going to do the Ogryn Bodyguard for the 4-up Invul. But there are a lot of good reasons to not do it in that order. The next major thing about this unit is it just doesn't die. A couple of stories from my personal games. I was playing up against a Dark Angels player, and they had a Redemptor and a Ballististred both shoot at the same unit, and the unit lived. In another game, when I was playing up against Tau, a Riptide and Sunforgers both shot at the unit, and they lived. They did almost no damage to it. Wesley St. Hines, who was one of the people who was first really pushing this unit, was saying that he is currently 4 out of 4 in surviving charges by Deathwing Knights into this unit. One of the major things to really think about is the fact that we are going from toughness 3 to toughness 6, which is, in a lot of situations, is functionally -2 to wound, because we go from being less than their strength, strength 4 and strength 5 are wounding on 3s, but if we go to toughness 6, we are now higher than their strength, which is going from wounding on 3s to wounding most things on 5s. And that's where a lot of people get caught off guard when they're playing up against this unit, is they are expecting that they're going to be wounding on 3s, maybe 4s, when in fact, it's functionally -2 to include the Ogryn Bodyguard. So your opponent has to commit real damage, and there's not a lot at 100 to 200 points that is going to efficiently trade into this unit. So your opponent is going to have to bring out some of their big guns in order to actually deal with this unit. One other major thing to think about, especially with the Cadian Command Squad who takes the Master Vox, is you just have this floating order, right? Because the unit cannot order itself, you're going to be giving this order to something else in your army. And it doesn't always matter, but there are enough times where making a unit move 3 extra inches, or giving a unit a couple of extra shots from their rapid-fire guns, or take cover, is going to preserve a unit that you would have otherwise lost, or allow you to score a secondary that you wouldn't otherwise score. So just keep that in mind where you have the 1 extra order just floating around if you're bringing a Cadian unit. One of the major things that you can do with this unit is stake a claim. And if you're used to playing with Krieg in the Index, this should be a strategy that is fairly familiar to you. You're going to hide behind a wall with 1 model standing on the objective, and then your opponent can either shoot you off of the objective, or they can ignore you and let you score the objective. And then, because you only have 1 model exposed, that model, you can kill it, but then anything else after that, they're not going to be able to continue to shoot at you because you're hiding behind the wall. And then on our turn, you resurrect a model, and you put it back onto the objective so you can still score the primary. The other major thing that we're doing with this unit is it's just pretty good at killing MSU. Anything that is T3 or T4 are generally going to get wiped by these units pretty efficiently. You're going to kill 3 to 5 Marines in melee with Cadians. You're going to kill 3 to 5 Marines in shooting with Catachan, and between both melee and shooting, you can kill almost any 5-man unit in the game that's not like a Terminator equivalent. So any of your jump pack intercessors, aspect warriors, cultists, we're going to be able to hunt all of these down pretty efficiently. And because we are way more durable than our opponent expects, we can oftentimes kill the thing, and then our opponent isn't able to trade back without putting real firepower into a unit that they weren't expecting to. A brief note on detachments. In general, Bridgehead and Recon have a big need for units that are more than toughness 3 or 4, and they also like some minor melee tools. So these detachments tend to prefer this extra staying power that Cadians provide. On the other hand, Hammer of the Emperor and Mechanized Assault don't really need the melee power that you provide because of how much reach they already have on the board. You can already tend to get things behind walls in order to root out any staging points just by shooting, by using Toroxes and running through walls. So it has a small preference here for Catachan Command Squad, simply because having that little bit of extra shooting after you get out of a transport can really help put the hurt on things that are hiding behind walls, and we can't charge these targets anyway. Both of the command squads are still playable in Combined Regiment and Siege Regiment, but it depends a lot more on your playstyle and specific needs in your list, whereas some of the other detachments, they're just stuff that you're going to be putting in your list by default. So to wrap it all up, the TLDR is it's just good business, right? This unit is incredibly points efficient. It falls into a similar category of units like Ogryn, Hellhounds, and Hydras, where their rules are okay, but the main thing that you're doing with them is it's an efficient ball of stats that depends a lot on how many points it's worth. If it is cheap, you're going to bring it because it is cheap. And this unit currently, for what it does and how much firepower opponents need to put into it, is very cheap. This combination of units has a lot of room before it's externally non-viable. So if we're comparing it to, like, if we were to play it against Space Marines, this unit is still going to be good for a long time. However, the difficulty is it has a lot of competitors internally. It doesn't take this unit going up a lot of points for a unit of 3 Ogryn or 2 units of 3 Ogryn to suddenly be a better investment of our points. But it is a unit that you can come back to over and over again in order to say, is this cheap enough to put in my list? And right now, the answer is absolutely yes. Well, that's everything. Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Officer Training School. Once again, my name has been Joshua Joushi Howard. If you're interested in participating in the community, talking to top guard players, and having better access to me, of course, make sure you send me the password on either Discord or Reddit. The password continues to be Rough Riders, and I will send you a link to the Discord. Also, if you're interested in some personal coaching, I do have the business available. I'll go ahead and throw it up on screen here. If you're interested, go ahead and send me an email at the email for this YouTube channel, and we can go ahead and see if we can get something set up that is useful for both of us. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.